All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking what is honestly a bit of a secret weapon for the wealthy. We're talking about strategically using modern lending to actually build your net worth. You know, we're pretty much always told from day one to avoid debt at absolutely all costs, right? But today, we're going to look at the hard data that proves why playing it entirely safe like that might actually be the very thing holding you back. So is debt actually the secret to wealth? I mean, it sounds completely counterintuitive, doesn't it? But did you realize that highly successful entrepreneurs literally do not fear debt at all? They actively use loans to completely accelerate their wealth creation. We tend to look at these massive billionaires and just assume they're throwing around their own cash for everything. But the reality, they are heavily leveraging debt. Now, obviously, there is a massive difference between loan and how someone who is actively building immense wealth uses one. And it really boils down to this fundamental difference. The wealthy borrow for assets that pay them back, while everyone else borrows for liabilities that just drain them dry. An asset literally puts money right back into your pocket. We're talking commercial real estate or business capital that actually generates revenue. Liability, on the other hand, just takes money out. Think about buying the absolute newest iPhone on EMI, or taking out a personal loan for a shiny new car that loses a chunk of its value the second you drive it off the lot. If you lock yourself into EMIs for liabilities, well, your entire life just becomes about paying off that past debt. So here's a roadmap for decoding exactly how you can access this kind of wealth building capital. We'll cover 1, the good loan secret, 2, legacy banking bottlenecks, 3, transactions versus personas, 4, the digital banking advantage, and 5, unlocking your capital. Starting off with Section 1, the good loan secret. Get this, there is a staggering reality in consumer banking right now. A massive 60% of people are deeply dissatisfied with their banks. Why? Because banks are constantly pushing the completely wrong financial products on them. People end up totally trapped with products they don't even really understand, paying ridiculously high fees, and ruining their credit scores. All because the bank failed to provide any real clarity. Basically, they're being sold liabilities, not tools for asset generation. Which leads us perfectly into Section 2, legacy banking bottlenecks. To put things into perspective globally, the cost of capital varies wildly. In the US, it sits around 2 to 5%. In China, it's about 4 to 6%. But in India, it's a massive 8 to 10%. This historically high cost of capital makes lending accessibility a huge hurdle for emerging businesses. Remember, this is a developing, cash-rich economy where capital hasn't always just flowed freely, and that makes acquiring the exact right kind of loan absolutely critical. To actually navigate this, we have to look at the sheer friction involved. Contrast the outdated paperwork-heavy processes of legacy banks where, let's be honest, just updating a passbook feels like a massive chore, with the incredibly smooth integrations of modern fintechs. Legacy banks are literally driven by systems framed decades ago. They just weren't built for today's digital speed. If a small business needs a simple API for fund transfers, legacy banks struggle to provide it without massive institutional bottlenecks. On the flip side, modern banks are incredibly agile. They're tech first. They invest heavily in technology because they know it's the only way to actually deliver services at scale. Let's dive into Section 3, transactions versus personas. This is where the profiling differences get really interesting. Legacy banks basically assess you through a people. They judge your worth based solely on isolated transactions at a single physical branch. To them, you're just a one-dimensional risk. If you want a credit card, a locker, or a personal loan, they're highly hesitant. Their risk exposure is incredibly limited, and because they haven't profiled you well at all, they really struggle to recommend products that actually serve your wealth-building goals. But modern banks, totally different ballgame. They utilize your entire digital footprint to construct a highly accurate, dynamic persona. They connect every single financial data point right to your PAN card. It's actually fascinating. They don't just see a single transaction, they see your whole financial ecosystem. By analyzing your entire credit history, any defaults, your active accounts, your overall banking behavior, they actually understand your true global risk profile. There's a great quote from our source material that really hits the nail on the head here. It says, they're creating a persona for you. What all you do, what all you have, and what might be best for you. This shift is a game changer. It means agile banks are actively competing to give you the capital you need. Because they actually understand your exact profile, their risk-taking appetite is so much larger, which means they can offer you much higher limits and far better access to capital. Moving right along to Section 4, the digital banking advantage. Here's something that might surprise you. Over 60% of internet penetration is actually in rural areas. That's huge. It means even rural cooperative banks are literally being forced to adopt robust, asset-light web models just to keep up with the digital demand of today's entrepreneurs. Tech companies are stepping in to provide these models to smaller banks so they can actually compete. This enables businesses everywhere to mobilize the funds instantly, rather than just using these cooperative banks as glorified collection boxes. And this massive digital foundation is what finally allows for hyper-personalization. When a bank knows exactly who you are and what you need, they don't just blindly sell you a liability that's going to tank your credit score. Instead, they completely curate capital and credit limits directly to your unique portfolio. They match your specific, immediate needs with a realistic risk expectation. And finally, Section 5, unlocking your capital. Okay, so how do you personally take advantage of this? How do you deliberately build that elite digital footprint? It really comes down to 3 steps. Step 1, push your CIBIL score over 750. Do this by using small credit responsibly for things you already have the cash for, and just pay them off perfectly. Step 2, maintain highly consistent, formalized banking cash flows. No more hiding cash under the mattress, okay? Everything needs a paper trail. And step 3, consistently file your income tax returns. If you meticulously follow these 3 steps, you unequivocally prove your creditworthiness. You become highly attractive to these modern algorithmic lenders. Once you secure that capital, you use it to buy a real asset, something like commercial real estate. What you want to do is target properties that yield at least a 6% rental return. Let's say you use bank financing at a 9% interest rate to buy a commercial property. Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. Today, we're setting out on a mission to completely flip the script on how you view debt. You know, for most of us, just hearing the word loan triggers this instant wave of anxiety. We've basically been wired from day one to think that debt is this massive trap we have to avoid at all costs. But what if I told you that when you engineer it correctly, debt is actually a mathematical wealth-building tool? In this analysis, we're going to decode the exact framework the ultra-rich use to absolutely multiply their net worth, and show you how you can take those exact same principles and apply them to your own financial journey. Let's get into it. Okay, let's dive into this blueprint. We've got a great structured roadmap today. We'll hit the secret of loans, assets versus liabilities, the commercial property playbook, finding desperate deals, the rent versus EMI math, and wrap up with building long-term wealth. All right, starting right off with Section 1, the secret of loans. So here's the really fascinating paradox. Middle-class earners often avoid loans like the plague, right? They strive to live completely debt-free. Meanwhile, billionaires, people like Ambani and Adani, they actively use debt to build their empires. The big secret here isn't about taking the loan itself. It's about what exactly that borrowed money is buying. The wealthy literally never borrow money to consume. They borrow money to buy assets that put cash right back into their pockets. It's a totally different way to play the game. Which brings us perfectly to Section 2, assets versus liabilities. Listen, if there is one absolute unbreakable rule of financial growth, it's knowing the difference between the things that feed you and the things that bleed you. Take a liability loan, for example. That's your car EMI, or putting a brand new iPhone 13 Pro on monthly installments just to keep up appearances, or even worse, taking out a high-interest personal loan for a medical emergency just because you skipped buying